Lesson 48, percent of a whole. So when we're talking about percents of a whole, we're going to be using ratios and proportions. Here we got a ratio box, but the difference here, instead of the ratio, we're just going to be using percent and then the actual count. So here, let's take a look at some examples here. 30% of the students ride the bus. If 210 do not ride the bus, how many students are there in all? So percent in the one column, 30% ride the bus. So if I have 30% that ride the bus, that means 70% does not ride the bus. That gives us a total percent of 100. You got to make sure that the percents all add up to 100. And then the actual count. If 210 do not ride the bus, so I can put 210 here because 210 does not ride the bus. How many students are there in all? So I'm trying to find the total. So you can see that I can use the different proportions here in order to solve this one. I'm just using the bottom four boxes. So it's really 70 over 100. It's the same as 210 over t. So I have two ratios or two proportions equal to each other. And now there are a couple ways you can solve this one. You can cross multiply and divide, or I know there's a relationship between 70 and 210. 70 times 3 gives me 210. Because these are proportional, I know that 100 times 3 will give us our total, which 100 times 3 would give us a total of 300 students. The second example, Hannah correctly answered 17 of the 20 questions on the game show. What percent of the questions did she answer correctly? So she correctly answered 17 out of the 20. That means she got 3 incorrect. We want to find out what percent of the number of questions did she answer correctly. So we're going to find where I put C, correct. So I use the four boxes that are involved with it. So the correct would be C over 100. It's the same as 17 over 20. Now I can look at the parts that I know. I know the 100% and 20. Those are related, so if I take 100 and I divide that by 5, that will give me my 20. Now if I go the other way, 20 times 5 gives me 100, so I can multiply 17 by 5, and that will give me my percent, my C. So 17 times 5 would give us 85%. So Shanna correctly answered 85% of the questions. Next example. Ryan has read 135 of the 180 pages in the book. What percent of the book has she read? So she read 135 out of the total of 180. We want to find out what percent of the book she read. So now we can set up our proportions. We have R over 100. It's the same as 135 over 180. Now I can think, what do I multiply 100 by to get 180? I know that if I multiply 100 times 1.8, I can get 180. But let's just do the cross multiplication this time. So I cross multiply that 135 times 100 gives us 13,500. Cross multiply the other direction, you get 180R. If I divide by 180 on both sides, you end up with an answer of R equaling 75. So she would have, what percent? That would have been 75% of the book. Next one, McGregor is growing alfalfa on 180 acres, which is 30% of his farmland. McGregor has how many acres of farmland? So the actual count, 180 acres, and that's 30% of his total farmland. We need to find the total acres of farmland that he's got. So we're trying to find the T here. So now if I take my 30 over 100, that has to equal 180 over the T. And I know that 30 times 6 gives me my 180. That means 100 times 6 will give me my total. So the total would have to equal 600 acres. And the last two problems. The frequency of the letter E in written English is about 13%. On a page of a novel that has about 2,000 letters per page, about how many occurrences of the letter E can we expect to find? So the letter E happens about 13% of the time, and on a page that has a novel of 2,000 letters per page, that would be our total. We need to find about how many occurrences can we find the letter E. So we establish our proportions, so 13 over 100 is the same as E over 2,000. I know that 100 times 20 will give me my 2,000. So 13 times my 20 will give me my E. So 20 times 13 gives us 260 occurrences. And the last one here, the Springfield Sluggers won 64% of their games. So I'm going to put the 64 here because that's the percent, and lost 9 games. So they lost 9 games here. How many games did the Sluggers win? So we need to find out how many games they won. Now I can figure out the percent that they lost. The percent that they lost would have been 36. So I'm going to use these 4 here to find my W. So 64 over 36 is the same as W over 9. I know that 36 divided by 4 gives me 9. So 64 divided by 4 will give me my W. 64 divided by 4 would give you 16 games. So that is our lesson today on percent of whole.